You're listening to the Actors Podcast, a podcast where I share what I've learned as an actor and as a producer. My name is Douglas Taurel, and I'll be sharing thoughts on the acting business, the art of acting, and a few other lessons that I've picked up from my experience as a professional actor. I've been fortunate enough to produce both plays and films, and I hope the stuff that I share on this podcast will inspire you as an actor.
So, I am here with Patrick Lillis, a very dear friend of mine, directed and developed over 20 solo shows. He's worked on Broadway, off-Broadway. He's been nominated for, won the New York Innovative Theater Award for Outstanding Director, did Fringe Award in New York for Festival Award of Excellence for Directing, a member of Labyrinth, founder of the Farm Theater, and inducted into the Indie Theater Hall of Fame. And more importantly, someone who I love talking baseball with, and he's the director of my solo show, The American Soldier. So, Patrick, I mean, you've directed a lot of solo shows, and they all, it's like you have a secret sauce because they're all very successful. How did you first get into directing solo shows? Because, I mean, that's a different beast than anything else.
Yeah, that's it's funny. I should have thought, like, what was the first one? And I think some of it was that I didn't have time. It was funny, like, I had taken on this, I started consulting for nonprofit, and I was pursuing directing, and all of a sudden I met one-on-one with somebody. It might have been at Dina Taubman's A Line in the Sand, like right. 2003. Might have been the first one where, I mean, I think I've done others before then, but that was the first one where I sat down and I met the person, and Dina was great. She had this very Anna Deavere Smith style thing on Columbine. But we could work 3 hours because it was just two of us. We could work anytime, and all of a sudden, and then I started taking on other things. I was doing this consulting work. I was not directing full projects as much because I was doing new play development. So I was teaching at NYU's writing program. So I could teach, I could do new play development, and then I could rehearse for like 3 hours. And if it worked to do 10 to 1, we could do 10 to 1. And 4 to 7 worked. And the flexibility was actually the thing that got me. And then I got invited to do another one right after that. And it was the idea of the intimacy of the hearing why the person wanted to tell the story. And connecting, and all of a sudden finding, it's the same thing as cultivating a new play and finding the story in there, but I find with solo shows, the passion for the why is so strong.
Right. Do you find that stronger than multi-character plays? Because it kind of has to, right? Because it's just you up there, so you can't, like, you can't hide behind a coffee cup.
Well, and there's funny thing, there's things with the like I write plays and I've directed, traditional plays, and that idea of somebody always says, like, oh, which character is you? Well, they all are in some point, and that's always true. But when you're investing, when you're doing The American Soldier, you have a reason you said that's the idea.
Yeah. And
you're going to commit to doing everything. You're going to make sure the story's as good as it can be. You're going to make sure the impact is as good as it can be. You're never going to hide in the acting.
No. You can't, right?
Yeah, you can't.
Because it's just you up there. After a while, you get found out.
And why would you do it? Like, it's one thing if you hire somebody and they're not bringing it. But if it's you created it and you're not bringing it and you're the one who had the idea in the past, so it's always, I find the commitment level dramatically higher across the board.
I mean, I chose to do a solo show mainly because, well, I thought that it was financially cheaper. And it's kind of like you think, I've done some producing before. You're like, okay, I'm just going to do me. I think it's less people to control, less people to manage. Less money, but it's not. It's actually almost more expensive. You have to manage even more. So, I mean, what do you think what are the advantages, if you think, of doing a solo show?
Well, it's funny. I think it becomes more expensive for a different reason. I think the room rental can be less. I think the props can be less. I think but the thing that happens when you do your own solo show, so you don't pay the writer, you don't pay the actor. So it becomes more expensive in a different way because you're also the actor and the writer, so you're giving all that time, and you're also doing the job of producer most of the time. I mean, everybody's goal when they're doing a solo show is to find a producer, because if there's that magical being out there, and it's not going to happen. Well, the advantage for me is flexibility.
What do you mean when you say flexibility? Like, what do you mean?
Flexibility meaning you can work around. When you have to produce, right? Say you're like, oh, what I have to do today is I have to market, and I have to do an interview, or I have to do something. You're not rescheduling 12 people.
Right. Oh, okay. I was just saying, like, so scheduling wise, it is easier, right? Yeah, because you just call me, say, hey,
can we do an hour later?
Later, yeah.
You know,
you don't have to call. Oh, we got to call 6 people.
Right. You're not calling everybody, and you can plan ahead. And also, there's also something about solo shows that I believe it's like 3 to 4 days a week maximum, because I haven't had the luxury of being at the Public Theater and rehearsing a play like that. But if you're doing it independently, I know that you need the time to also learn the lines and do things. So there's a little less time in the room that's committed. So that's also why flexibility is it. The other one is control of, you're really doing it because you have something to say. The other one, obviously, of showcasing your own talent, putting yourself in front of everybody, showing that what you can do. But I think it's you have something to say, and the residual thing, and this is interesting, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it, is it's empowering. It's incredibly empowering to know.
You mean as an actor or
as a person?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, like you created a show. You went to Scotland. You presented a show on a topic. You met people that impacted it.
It's life changing. It's I think the number one thing that I've gained, because as an actor, as all artists, we all have insecurities. Like, am I good enough, talented enough? And so the beast of doing a solo show when it's just you up there, like the level of confidence you gain moving forward from that is you can't put a value to that, because your memory gets stronger, your lines get stronger, you could do it, and all of a sudden you become a different type of performer. Because
I'm just aware, for me, I became aware. I just performed my solo play that I wrote.
Yeah, it's great.
Thanks.
Beautiful.
Yeah, but I became aware through that like really, literally, so silly, but that there's no substitute for the work. Was aware of how much discipline it takes, like it sounds silly, but to be an actor, because there's nobody going to give me a cue.
Right.
Until not only did I have to learn the lines, but then I had to learn and the intention. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's like, oh, if I hit this, then I can cue myself. And it's like, oh, why am I able to flow?
Everything gets heightened when you're on, because it's just you up there.
It's just you, and you can't relax for a second.
No. And you get those moments, and I'm sure you felt that as a performer. You're like, there's moments that you're performing, like, oh man, I'm tired right now. I'm like, oh shit, I got 20 more minutes to go. There's no one coming on. I gotta find the energy. This is it. It's just me.
And I gotta keep the drive. And it was funny. Like yours was on the PTSD, and mine was this topic of suicide. But it was the thing about empowering is before I'd go on, I remember standing backstage, and something my director had said to me is like, right, you're doing this because you have something to say.
Right.
And like, if I remember that I have something to say,
it goes back to where you're saying, like, the why.
The why, and that why, when I talk about empowerment, really empowered me, because not only become a stronger actor, but also just a stronger work ethic. Like I think I had a good work ethic before, but now I'm aware of how much everything is interdependent. Like my putting in the time on this allows me to have the conversation I'm having on stage, but I can't have the conversation on stage if I'm sort of. Funny, I just performed for high school kids, and they asked how much of it was improv. And it was funny, my first writer self was insulted. Like, none of it, But I thought, the only reason it feels that way is because I did the work so that I could relax, so I could play.
Yeah, no, when I saw your show, I actually thought, is he improvising? Because you came right on, and you were like kind of like the MC or the artistic director saying, hey, turn your phones down, thanks for coming, But then you never went off again, and then the play went on. I was like, is he improv? There's no way he's improvising this whole thing, But over time, I realized, oh no, and I thought, wow, that was really smart, because it's great for the audience, because it kind of keeps us off guard, Like, is he going back? Is he starting now? He's going to go back. Oh.
I was just trying to welcome people into the conversation.
10 minutes later, we're in the show. You're like,
wait, it started.
Yeah. What I think you do really well, and it's a question that I have, is you come into the rehearsal process with basically words on a page, right? And with an idea, and then you're like, okay, you move there, move here. Okay, let's grab this intention here. So, how do you start shaping the show? Like how, because you do it so confidently, and I remember that was one of the things that it put me so much at ease, because you were so confident as a director. You're going to go there, and then you're going to go here, and you're going to sit there. And I was like, yeah, this is great, because now I can just be the actor. And
I say some of it I take for granted. Some of it, like, I just see it, and it's a little bit of history of spatial storytelling. Like, I've been directing 25 years professionally, so like that happens. But then there's this other thing that's happened since I started directing, and I think some people do it and some people don't. Some people don't have to work out as hard. Is I can see something like, oh, your one character in Vietnam, like, oh, if he sits down on the trunk and then, oh, this guy stands on the trunk. Then we have a use of dynamic space, but it's just coming. But so that part.
So, like, do you try to focus on shape rather than?
It's something I became aware of after doing. I was grateful that Dina's played and workshopped a little before I came in, so I got to see different characters do different things. I realized, oh, the thing about a solo show is you need to figure out, but you have to find a moment to theatricalize and change the space. So I'm looking for that. I'm also looking for if people are playing multiple characters, like how do I differentiate this person from that person? And space is one way to do it. Physicality.
So you kind of like immediately, what you start doing is breaking it down to whether if it's a multi-character to character to section to really, you start slowly breaking it down really fastly.
And trying to make sure that giving the audience clear clues as to who they're watching.
Because you don't have scene structure in a solo show, right? So you can't go, okay, I'm going to scene one, I'm going to do this. So if I've done this for scene one, I got to go here for scene here.
I got to be moving forward, and now this has to be the office,
right.
And this, it's like, no, it's introducing different people. And then what I also find is solo shows, I find, like you said, the scene, I find they sit in chapters. Like, even if there's 3 characters in a row, they're all hitting a certain theme. And this is hitting a certain idea. Because you're not jumping all around, because you are moving, but you want to make sure you bring the audience with you. So you're in those chapters, it's like, are they dynamically different? Because if they are, then you want the physical life to be dynamic. Are they subtly different? Then physically you just want to bring it subtly different, because you want the audience to unconsciously know how to listen and experience it. And then the other thing I want to say is just when you asked, like, you go here, you're going to go here, is I also do the homework in the way that I can come in the room, and it's what you want from an actor to play, is I trust. I trust when I see an impulse that...
You mean in the rehearsal?
From the rehearsal, like, oh, I saw that you wanted to do something. Let's do that. Let's get you up. Let's do the whole gun. Like,
because that was another thing that I found about working with you is the level of confidence. I only know from my personal experience, but I always feel confident in the rehearsal process, which is such a huge relief, because I was very insecure before the rehearsal process. Because you have material that you kind of put together. You don't know if people are going to be scratching their butts by within 10 minutes, or people are going to be like, "This guy's horrible." You don't know if you can do it, if you can be a solo show artist. You're like, "Am I too?" You come in the rehearsal and you start. I guess because now that I've seen how you do it, you've broken down into little sections, that it's easier to get confidence section to section to section, instead of saying, what's the...
Right, we have 60 minutes.
Yeah,
it's like, and it really is acting like if you're directing is scoring it for the story of it, but you can't play, if you can't look at a Hamlet speech and say, I'm going to play the whole speech. I'm playing minute to minute to minute. So if you're really looking at beat to beat, and you're playing it organically and honestly, and you're finding why, then those things start to happen. And then the job is to say, and then I think the job is to watch and go, oh, that impulse was great, that impulse was great. We need to bring this down because we want to hear.
How do you like grab an actor's style? Because I'm sure, like, Adina and me were very different actresses. I mean, night and day. And if people who don't know Adina, she's a female, and she's very gentle, and she's directing a play about Columbine. And if you can use your imagination, we're very different creatures as artists. So I would imagine her style is much different than my style, So how do you like grab your style and still allow?
First thing I do is I read the script, and then I meet the person, and I put the script aside and I talk to them and say, oh, why do you want to do the play?
That was another thing I was going to have to. That's a great question to ask. Always. Why?
And so I hear that, because most of the time the script's okay. But if I start to hear why, then I start to see if the script is better than I thought, because, oh, that's in here, or, oh, we need to work on the script, because that's an interesting, because the person always has a good reason. Plus, when you hear the person talk, you start to see their personality, you start to see their energy, you start to get, because that's...
So does that tell you, like, okay, this guy's a little bit more aggressive, the show's going to probably lean in this direction, this girl's this way, I'm going to lean in this way.
And there's a little more confidence, and there's like, oh, this person wants to be funny.
Right.
Like,
so you can't. So once you get that vibe from an actor, you can't say a funny person. We're going to try to make him aggressive, because it's not going to fit.
And also, they didn't sign up to do the solo show because they wanted to become a different person.
Right. Right.
I mean, maybe if you're Whoopi Goldberg and you're doing
Yeah.
hard characters and you've done something
that's good.
and you're already a performer.
Yeah.
But somebody else is coming in because they want to use their instrument to do something.
And, you don't. I never thought about that, Patrick. Like, yeah, when you do a solo show, the only way it can be successful is if it's your DNA,
Yeah.
right? You can't unless maybe. But even John Leguizamo, he uses his DNA.
That's him.
That's him all the way.
Boom. I mean, on steroids, he's like
Right.
amazing.
Exactly. So you can't really. I never thought about that, but yeah,
But we're not going to take him and do Mark Twain.
right, because it's
I mean,
not
I'm
going
not
to
saying
work.
that he couldn't,
But-
and he could now because he could sell a ticket. But his first solo show isn't. I couldn't imagine Leguizamo was going to come and say, "I want to do Mark Twain."
Right.
You know.
Yeah, I'm gonna do all 60 minutes of Mark Twain. I guess so. I guess that vibe when you meet an actor, I mean, like, what compels you to say, I'm sure you've said no before. So what compels you to say yes, and what compels you in an actor? Is it the story or both, the vibe and the actor? Story.
Well, story and why.
Why?
The why. When I ask why you want to do it, because when I start to hear that, then I start to see how hard the person's going to work,
Right.
and that's because
That's vital, right?
That's vital.
Yeah.
That's
You can't do it.
I can't. There's nothing I can do. I can't. You'd have to pay me to write the script, and then it's not your show. Because a lot of for me directing a solo show early. I say, when I say no, can I get an email from somebody that says I have an award-winning solo show? Because I'm like, well, you don't need me. Go for it. Go for it.
Right.
Your show's great. And if they tell me like the script is finished, then I'm like,
Why do you need me?
You
then?
don't need me.
You need a lighting designer.
Yeah. Or you need a director who just wants to stage it, but I want to get underneath it. If we get underneath it, we're going to find out the script needs to change. Not that it has to, but it's probably going to want to. So those are the listening. Listening's the other one. It was funny. I think about the why, the passion, but also when they listen. If the person doesn't listen, I'm like, that's not going to be an enjoyable 3 hours. And when you were doing the introduction about the fact that we're dear friends and we've gone to baseball games, and it's when you do a solo show, they're not a cast member in a play. You get invested in their story, why they want to tell that story.
I mean, yeah, you're just spending time with that dude or a girl,
and you're talking about the artistry, their personal presentation and investment as the actor, and then why they're committing 20 hours a week outside of rehearsal minimum to getting it done. You're going to know everything about them, or you're going to know a lot about them. And it was, it was interesting. It's interesting. So it's. Do you want to spend time with the person? But those are things that make me want to spend time with them: is personality, why, and do they listen? Not like do they listen like they'll do everything I say. I just want to know I was heard.
Yeah, I mean, I think people who are listening to this, I think the most valuable thing that I remember when I first met Patrick, that was the first question he asked me, and I had been working on my story for a while, and so I was really lost, and I listened to Greg Lucas talk, and he says, when you start working on a show more than 2 or 3 years, you're in trouble. And so I was feeling really in trouble because I was already like 5 years in. But that was it was the why question, because you said, why do you want to do this show? It gave me such clear focus. It was like, and then it made the writing easier, it made the editing easier. The editing, which was the hardest part, right? Because you vomit so much that you don't know what's good and what's not. And then I just think that was a really powerful question that you always ask, and I would imagine you ask that with every solo show artist.
Yeah.
Why you do that?
Yeah.
Why you want to do the show? Because it's crystallizing in a way.
And it's interesting because I'm doing a show on. I'm helping somebody develop their show on anxiety, and I've already done a solo show on anxiety. Did you see Kelly Kinsella's When Thoughts Attack?
No.
I directed. It was. Right.
I've seen Lee's and Adina's and then yours.
She's hilarious. She's very funny. She understands it. She gets on top of it. She got a sense of improv and stand-up in her, and also willing to take the emotional risk. And the person I'm starting, and her reason for doing that journey was very specific. And this person's show is nothing like that. It's the same thing. So when it came to the why, because I went, well, what am I going to learn about anxiety? Because that's the other thing. Why do I do it? I'm like, I want to be interested.
Yeah.
If you're doing something on PTSD, I want to learn about it. I want to have an impact.
So the story's important to you as well.
Yeah, and I have to go on the journey through the process.
Right, because if I was really cool and we're getting along really well, but my story was stupid.
Or if I've done 2 shows on PTSD.
Right.
I'm like,
so if some other guy came now, hey, I have a very similar theme, you're like, I've done that already.
if he said why, and he said, oh, because my wife just got back from, and I want to tell her story. That's a different thing.
Right.
You did the entire history of the American
Becomes
War.
a different story.
Becomes a different story, and it's going to become a different personal experience. So, and this person, the why, was listening to them and go, oh, you have she's a highly intellectual paralysis because because she can't let go of any detail.
Right.
It has to keep
Collects
searching.
so much.
And I thought, oh, that's a different story. This is a person who moves from one fear to another to another. This is a person who's accumulating stuff. And at the end of our meeting, I thought, oh, this energy is going to meet this person. It is accumulating. And I thought, oh, it's going to be an interesting journey, because I'm going to find out that what that's like and what that paralysis is. And I'm interested because I think I have it marginally, that kind of anxiety and a little bit of paralysis. But I don't have it this way.
Right.
If I can understand it a little better, maybe I can either cut myself some slack or get over it.
What's the most, where do you find the most satisfaction when you're directing the show? Do you find it that first night at the opening, we're like, oh my gosh, yep, I did it again, and I see this, because you take something that's paper, and then you meet for 3 to 4 weeks with some guy or girl, and then next thing you know, you have a full house and you have a story. And I could only imagine that must be immensely satisfying. But do you find it different? Is there a point in the rehearsal period where you're like, okay, now this is really nice what I'm doing? And because every artist says that, right? I know I do.
I love it. Yeah, I have two points in it. One is when I say, I'm always excited early in the process when we discover what it's really about.
Right, process.
And once I get, once I get that moment, then like you were saying about the editing and the writing, so I'm like, well, now we know what we're doing, and that's exciting. Then for me, the most exciting moment is we brought in minimal design elements for your play, but very effective ones. And once it's put in the room, when I see the play in the room, that's when I'm most excited, because you can't control the audience.
You mean like when you say the room on stage?
No, in rehearsal. Like if we were in a rehearsal room and you do a run through, but the play happens, the experience, I have the experience of watching it, then I know the play is alive, and we did our work and it's great. That's when I feel the best, because the audience, all of a sudden the audience thing, it's great that you asked that question, because the audience with a solo show is the hardest thing for a solo person to learn, is that all of a sudden they have a new scene partner, because that's their scene partner.
The audience.
Right.
Yeah.
And whether they're doing a private thing on stage and it's a given circumstance and this person, or they're really narrating and talking direct address to the audience, either way, that response is going to be so viscerally different. And you're not looking at your scene partner another point. That's the
You're
thing.
feeling the audience. It's very true.
And it's going to take, I know that it takes a solo show, in my experience, you have to put that thing up at least 4 times before you know what you really have.
Yeah.
Because you've created something in the room, but the room told me that we have what we were seeking. Now they're shaping and something new. So I love that moment in the room. And then the thing I love is after about 3 months or doing it maybe more than 10 times, hearing the artist talk about the experience with the show, because it was funny, like just emails from Edinburgh when you were there, is like, oh, here's somebody who now not only is performing their show, but they're having a sense of being an advocate for a cause.
Yeah. No.
And that advocacy is when you say with the pride, or, oh, I did it again. It's like, no, it's the discovery, ownership of the show. And then the pride is like, oh, we're having an impact.
You hit it on the head. When I did the show in Houston, I thought I had discovered just about every beat in the show. And I got to Houston, and I think a lot of it was because I had done it so much and so intense for a while that when I did it in Houston, things marinated better. So things that I was bringing back up were now very comfortable with. What they say, I don't know if it's Edwin Booth or someone, but someone very famous actor, old actor, said that a show doesn't even get to be good until about 8 weeks after rehearsal and performance. And so I felt really good, and I was finding stuff that we talked about in rehearsal, and I was hitting them, and I found other beats that I didn't notice, and had an impact, because I showed some of those veteran letters of people who were replying back to me, and I was like, wow, this show is it's gotten, I think I mentioned it to you, it's the best it's ever been.
Yeah.
And I thought that we had already reached.
Something was great earlier.
Yeah, and it's richer now. I guess also because you're so more comfortable in it, like it's a...
Well, and now the first time you do it, it's unfair. You don't know what you have.
You're terrified. Yeah. If you could pee in your pants and people not laugh at you, you would, because you're just like, it's a level of anxiety that you're like... Oh.
You don't, because you don't...
Don't forget your lines.
It's a new play. It's a new play. It's never been done before. Nobody knows what to expect. And it's you. And like you said, in 10 minutes, they could be bored. Now, they're not... You got to trust the rehearsal room. That's why I say in the room, like, oh, I know we have something. But you don't know, and I didn't. I'm grateful to have performed in my solo show because I now, you sort of put yourself on
What's going to make you a better director?
I have such more empathy for that. I always knew the neurotic experience that the actor's having. Like when you said, I would say my lines every day of performance. I'd go for a run and say them out loud.
Yeah.
And then I'd take a shower after the run. And in the middle of the shower, I'd be like, I don't remember my lines.
I would do it in the hotel. Whenever I was by myself, I would do it in the hotel and I'd run it. And then there'd be moments when you're like, it's always that moment right before you go on. There's a section you want to run, right? Because you're not really, and then you take your thought off of it and you're like, what's my next line? What's the next line? And you're like, I'm about to go on. Oh no, I got to run that line. I got to run that line in my head. I got to run that line. What is it? Okay, so I was, yeah.
So I just reminded myself every time before I go on stage, just say the first line out loud.
Yeah. Muscle memory really kicks in.
It does.
How do you think shows have changed? I mean, I think now people make the decision, whether it's true or not, make the decision to do solo shows today because financially it's a little bit more feasible than for producers even. Like equity showcases are very expensive even. Yeah. No one even does those anymore. But I mean, how do you think they've changed in 20 years? And I say that, I mean, do you think they've gotten shorter? Do you think they've gotten simpler? Do you think they've gotten more?
Funny, I think I see a little bit of everything, but for me, they've gotten simpler. And also it's funny, I don't know if they've gotten shorter or longer, but I've taken out length as a need.
Yeah.
Like you don't have, if you do over an hour, you're putting yourself at risk of not being able to book the show after that experience. And, it's one thing if you're going to get picked up and be brought into a commercial off-Broadway house or something, sure, that hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes makes a difference for people. Or, Twilight, I saw that, like it's 2 acts, I think, it's a full event. But most of the time, I think time I'm not as worried about, especially because you're developing something, so you can put something up that's 20 minutes, you can put it up 40 minutes an hour. I also think it's about simplicity of figuring out how can you manage something to travel with it, because it does, and this is not, I don't know if this speaks to the industry or something like that. I just think it's about people figuring out how can I do the show, how can I make this my calling card, and if it's my calling card, it needs to go to Houston, it needs to go to Scotland. There's not going to be a truck, you have Lily Tomlin and John Leguizamo and people like that,
I think that's one of your greatest gifts, besides the process that you help the actor with and the shaping and the styling. Even though I thought when I chose an army trunk that was really simple, little did I know. People
be heavy.
Yeah, people haven't seen my show. When you do a solo show, when you pick an army trunk, you don't think that you're going to have to carry the army trunk to rehearsal, carry it away from rehearsal, carry it to the theater, carry it away from theater. You're not going to be able to store it, So, but all your shows, to a degree, are fairly simple. And I think set-wise, it was really simple. And I find it that it's a rare purity that you don't see on stage anymore, because you're forced to focus on theater.
On story.
Story, not, oh, look at that light change, or look at that set change, or...
And we did, it was funny because, there's some, you're right, I loved what we did because we had a flag behind it. It was very simple. It all fit in the trunk.
Yeah.
But had all the elements to allow it to be beautiful, the letter and things. But I think of, Adina's show had video in it.
Yeah, she did. She had projection in it.
But
her set was still pretty
that's
simple.
Now easier to do because you can put the projection on the computer. You're traveling with a projector that's tiny, so it's in a laptop.
You can probably run it from your phone now.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much simpler to do. You just need to, in her materials, is a screen and, figuring out, and the screen is in that particular show is like a bed sheet that's because it's about school shootings.
Yeah, you can get pretty creative
with hang with the homecoming, so it's great.
What's the biggest problem you face when you're creating a solo show with an actor?
I mean, that's the biggest problem. That's the first thing I want.
People who don't realize the work.
There's two things that happen. One has to happen early on is you have to be willing to be honest. Meaning you have to tell that you want to find the stakes in a story. And I know that sounds simple, but you have to be honest with yourself. And if you're going to go in front of 100 people or how many people and tell a story for an hour, you have to be willing to be honest with the facts of the story. The story doesn't have to be biographical.
Right, no.
But you have to be honest.
Mine wasn't, for people listening to this, mine wasn't.
And Adidas wasn't.
Right,
but you have to get underneath all of it to own it. And if you're going to do if you want to tell your story of Lee Kaplan, who I directed, about bullying, and he was great because nobody worked harder, but you have to talk about when you were suicidal from bullying, right, from picked on, why you were picked on, how it still impacts you 30 years later,
right?
And so when I find people aren't willing to be honest, then I'm like, well, then we're stuck, because you don't have to expose everything to the audience,
but you have to expose.
But you have to expose. You have to reveal something. You can't tell me you have a compelling story but not reveal the wound that
right.
you're out there to.
No, because people are there to see.
They want to see themselves.
They want to see themselves. You're that, as Ronaldo says, you're the mirror that's reflecting back, whether it's a good mirror or a bad mirror. But you have to reflect.
Yeah.
Because if not, then theater's dead.
And if you can't cover up, because we cover up every day.
Right.
So we're not learning anything, and we're not feeling validated because we're not seeing ourselves. And that's the validation that comes. And so that's the number one thing. And the second thing is the work. It's like, so funny. We're talking about 8 weeks of running. I'm directing a play right now. It's a very complex situation, and somebody's committed suicide, and a bunch of friends are getting together, and it's the end of the play, and the twin of the person who committed suicide is learning this revelatory thing that her brother was gay and she didn't know. I love the actress who's playing it, and we're just playing this part of, like, you have to be grasping while this is happening. You have to not be on top of it. You have to let yourself be out of control as you're learning this information. Right. And I remember it was so funny. She'd stopped yesterday or something. She's like, "Oh, it's so hard." Yeah. And I thought that was my response. I'm like, "Yes,
yes." Well, I mean, I remember. There's so many days. I remember coming to rehearsal with you, and there was days like this. It was kind of warm outside, and I remember going, "Gosh," and I was tired. Like, I don't want to rehearse the show. Like, I just don't want to do this right now. And I'm very motivated, so I can drive myself into it. But I remember, we'd talk sometimes, we'd speak for 20 minutes on baseball just to get my enough energy to start going. And then you'd finally go, "All right, let's go to work." And I'm like, "Oh, are you sure?" But no, I think as a performer, you don't realize the intensity of the work, because it's all you, and you have to, I always made a really concerted effort to, be off book, know what we worked on last week. I do my notes, because I was always a big fan of you, because I've seen you work at Labyrinth. I was like, that's a guy I really want to work with. He's amazing. And then people would tell me, "Oh yeah, he's really amazing." So I was kind of like, I felt like I had no leverage. So I felt like, I was kind of a little intimidated. I wanted to make sure that Patrick, he was glad that he signed on for this, what I thought, shit show,
I actually appreciated that, because I remember early on you would say that. You wouldn't say that, but you'd sort of ask, like, "Hey, is this, you're feeling like it's worth your time you're doing?" And
because I had tremendous respect for you. But there was those moments where you were just like, "Oh, man, I'm tired. This is way more work than I thought." I thought I was just going to learn some monologues and I was going to be shaped up and that's it. But, because I think what you don't notice as a performer is when you're in a rehearsal and it's not working, that's when the work starts, right? And that's a very scary feeling, because it feels like an abyss, because you feel like, oh man, and you're like, we're past the point of no return, so we got to make this work, and it's really, you got to make this work, and the director's going to shape you into it, but at the end of the day, you as a performer have to bring it.
And even because it's true, I mean, that's the other thing I'm learning as a director, is like, I can't do the work. I can inspire, I can cajole, I can try to explain.
You have to go there as an actor.
I can question, I can do everything, but you have to
open your heart.
And you have to sit at home for an hour and a half and look at your lines and do whatever process it is for you to learn those, so that the rest of it's not.
Yeah, because it's not fair for the director or for you to come into the rehearsal process, and that was my greatest concern, to sit here and like going, okay, we're doing stuff that you should have done at home already, and we're losing time, we're losing day. I'm tired. I'm sure you're tired, because I can only imagine to drive. I'm into sports, so you have to kind of motivate. You have to motivate. You can't, even when you're tired, you can't be coming in too tired, because if the actor's tired, that's not a good recipe for success.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say on the other side of that, when you said something, I forgot what it was, but it was about when I said the audience is a scene partner, one of my jobs in the room is to bring energy as the director, because it is unfair if you're performing and I'm not giving back. I'm your scene partner. I have to have something else happening in my mind.
You have a third eye.
I have to have a third eye. I have to be directing, and I have to be thinking critically, and I have to be making sure the story's happening, and I have to be watching and paying attention and making sure that if you are doing something that you're engaging, that I'm engaging back.
Yeah.
Because if I'm like, okay, I'm tired and I'm sitting back, you're working 3 times as hard. And it's like, it's not fair. And I've caught myself when you said, oh, you come in, you're tired. It's like, I've caught myself and going, you're not doing your job today. Like, and my job is not just to direct. Some of my job is to be the audience.
No, you're a motivator, because
audience.
You're the solid thing, that people are leaning up against. So I can only imagine the amount of work that goes on besides shaping and directing all the things that a director has to do. When it's just one person there, you have to drive that energy through, because there's days when an actor's motivated and he's feeling good. Cause like, let's say, there are a couple of rehearsals, we would have great rehearsal. So I was like chomping on the bit to come back. And then there were days when it was just dead, and you're like, oh. And then you were like, okay, well, tomorrow we're gonna rehearse that section again. I'm like, oh, what does that mean? Because I'm not gonna figure it out tonight what that section is. Yeah. So I mean, I can only imagine that it's a huge part of directing.
Yeah.
Just being that motivator. And
also trusting. It's funny when you said we're gonna work that section again. The most important thing to remember is when you said, I'm not going to figure it out. I'm like, no, we're going to rehearse that tomorrow. We're going to figure it out.
Right.
If we both know it didn't work today, not because one of us sucked.
Right.
It's because both of us don't have traction for it.
I would imagine there's directors who don't have that, especially solo show directors, or you're a director, but people who direct solo shows. It's actually relaxing for the actor when a director says, I don't know the answer. Right? Because it says, okay, we're on the same page here, so that means I can contribute, right? And I've worked with directors who they act like they know all the answers, and then you can't contribute because they know all the answers. So it creates there's a reverse effect, right? It makes you more insecure.
Now you're doing, and also if you know all the answers, A, tell me.
Yeah.
Sure, save me a little time. But B, then it's this thing of like, am I doing it right or am I doing it wrong? And it's like, there's no right or wrong.
Right.
It's very funny, about to be Yoda or something. There's no you're right or wrong. There's only do, and and in Peter Brook's book, there's only better.
Right.
Like this is more right. We don't know why.
What's the main piece of advice you would give an actor starting to work on a solo show?
The number one thing is for me is have something you're compelled to talk about.
Something passion.
Yeah, you have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because if you feel like, I want to create a showcase for myself, that's a reason to start, but find the thing that lights the fire in you that's going to be that.
Yeah, you better be very passionate about your subject, because if you're not going to be willing to put in the hours of the research and the study, because if you're like, I did this because I think this is kind of popular and cool, you're gonna run out of steam on the hard days.
You're gonna run out of steam, and it is. It's like because then you're the producer, and like you were saying about cost, you're raising the money, you're putting in the money, you're putting in the time, you're doing 4 jobs minimum that you're probably not paying yourself for, and it's like, do the thing you're passionate about, because when you're done, when you go on stage to do that solo show, whether it's to do a clown character, whether it's to do a solo cabaret act, or it's to do PTSD or a show on suicide, you're going out to have a relationship with an audience because you care. Right. And the second you go out and you're like, I just want to be loved.
Is that the biggest mistake you see actors make when they're doing a solo show?
Well, I think the start, just when you said when somebody's starting, I think the starting is like, I'm talented. I want to create an opportunity for myself. And I'm like, I always go, you are talented. I have no doubt about that.
Right.
But this
goes back to the why.
The why, because say it's mildly successful, you're gonna live with the play for a year, minimum.
Yeah, no, I know. I've lived mine. It's been almost 2 years now.
Because we had this moment that I'm going to share since it's recorded. But our first public presentation was on Memorial Day.
That's right.
And like little magic like that happens. You're doing a play about the military and PTSD, and it's Memorial Day.
It was actually even before that, if you think about it, because we did the first draft of it when we had Shakespeare in it.
Yeah.
To those 4 or 5 people.
Right, well, that's different. That's a test.
Right,
that's when it started. I was just thinking for the audience.
Yeah,
and that was just luck of scheduling.
Right, yeah.
And a little bit of like, is this luck? It's Memorial Day. Who's going to come see this depressing, serious topic And it's like, oh,
There's
a
people
great group of people came, and it was the right topic on the right day, and everybody felt validated. But that was, I'll talk about the 4 or 5 people coming earlier as a test to find out what you have. But I was thinking that we launched it, and magical things happened, because all of a sudden you realize, oh, we're doing it on Memorial Day. This play is important. And then, but yes, it's 2 years from the beginning of that journey of us working together. You still are having people book the show. You still have a relationship, and that's not going to happen if you're like, I could do 10 songs.
When I started this project, I can't even stress the level of security I had, and where the show has gone. Besides getting amazing reviews here and in Scotland, because we did it at 59 East 59, but we were nominated for an Amnesty Award for Theatre Excellence, and that was out of I think 3,000 shows in Scotland, or 15, a lot of shows, and that's all a credit to you. That is without a doubt a credit to how you were able, because yes, I did perform and yes, I brought it, but you need a jockey on the horse. You know what I'm saying? The horse is just going to go in circles, and that's where I was going. I was just going in circles. So you could be a stallion, but until you get a jockey on it, you're not going to go anywhere. And so that was a huge credit to you, and it just adds another feather to the many feathers in your cap.
Thanks. Thanks. We're being recorded, so I'm shy, because I was going to say it's nice, but the truth is, for me, any of that only happens because the person does the work.
Yes. No, you definitely have to do the work. I think.
And I agree, because I think, like you had said, you'd work on it for a while, and you sort of got to this place with it, and you're like, I don't know what to do with it. And then once we cracked open what to do with it and where the excitement was,
it became scary, because the days were coming that you're going to have to be on stage and do this thing. But there was also a level of exhilaration knowing that we took an idea and we took words that I had researched and letters that I had researched, and we turned it into an evening of theater.
A clear, impactful journey.
And it's an amazing process. And I think one of the things that you used to always say to me is, what you're really interested in is in process. Yeah. And we definitely had that. I'm sure all your performers had that. And I think that's what I saw Lee, I think, I saw Lee at he came to my show, and we spoke, and I said, it's kind of like he creates brothers and sisters, and we talked over email many times, and because I haven't talked to Adina much, but I've talked to Lee a lot, and we kind of, we know we've been through the same battles, and the same wars with the same general, and so you create a level of kinship that you can't explain. And so whenever we see each other, I'm sure he does, because I think of Patrick first. I say, hey, what's up, man? What are you doing now? And so there's a Patrick.
And I love that he showed up, because he showed up right East 59th when he did it. I remember that. And it meant so much to me, because I was like, oh, right. But I do like this. It's funny you say that, because this.
Well, you were sold out, dude. Yeah. And I'm sure half of those people there were somehow affiliated with solo shows that you have worked with.
Maybe not half, but a lot of them.
A lot of them were, man. So that's a tribute to you. We're almost wrapping up here. What advice would you give a director who's starting to work on a solo show?
You have to like people.
Okay, for sure.
I know that sounds obvious.
No, but you're right.
But you have to like people, and you have to be innately interested in who they are. Curious and patient. I think the most important thing is to know, like what you're just saying about that we're in the general, but the idea that we're in a conversation is, as much as the other person has to listen, the biggest skill, I think, for the solo show director is listening, and being able to listen and hear what's valuable in their why they're doing the show, what's valuable in the material they bring to you, and what's really valuable that you're seeing on stage that's going to make a story, and then echo it back to them. Because when they start to hear what you think is valuable, this is how you're going to find out. This is how I find out if I want to work with the person. And I know I did it with you. I say back to you what I heard. Oh, here's what I heard. And I start talking.
You're hoping the ball comes back.
And if you get excited by what you heard, that I heard from you, if you get excited thinking, yes, that is the show I want to do. Yes, you pulled out the things that are important to me. Oh, yes, I hear a structure.
Right.
Then it's like, so it's listening, but then validating them by sending it back, and then that's the beginning, because because from there you can go anywhere with the rehearsal process, because they know they're being heard, the performer knows it, they know they're being valued, and you're probably making them feel better than they did in the beginning.
That was the thing for me, because I was like, I was just happy, like, this guy knows what he's doing. I knew you knew what he was doing, but I'm involved with someone who knows what they're doing, and it's just it's exhilarating because you're like, yeah, I want to do that. You'd bring up moments about scenes. It's like, yeah, I want to do that. That. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. So I can only imagine if someone's going, no, I don't want to do that. That would be very draining.
Or somebody tells you, it's funny. I have one of my favorite people, and we're going to wrap up, I know, but my friend Cindy Kiter, whose dad is a Hall of Fame sports announcer, Les Kiter. But she called me to say, I didn't know her. She got my name from somebody. Said, can I talk to you? It was great. I'll never forget because I said, it's the bottom of the ninth. Can I call you back? And that's when she knew we were going to connect. But the person that read her script and said, this isn't a story, it doesn't make any sense to me. And she was going to give up,
right?
And somebody said, call me, and I called, and I met and did the same thing I did, put the script to the side to tell me straight. And it was like, hey, she's fascinating. Everything she does, she could tell you about lunch and you'd think you went to a play. Like, she's got this enthusiasm. But it was a love letter to her father, this play basically as an homage. And that's when you hear that and you go, oh, well, this is important. We're going to make this happen. And she got, before he passed away, she got to perform it in Hawaii where he lived in front of a huge audience that he was at. And it's like, that's one of the proudest things I think I've ever done in my theater career because it worked. But it's that idea that somebody would look at a script, if somebody wrote something, has a story, and to say, this doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. You can say, I'm not connecting to it, but to dismiss it.
Right.
Nobody sat down to write a bad play.
No.
Like, that's just not.
I think also what I would tell director, because in my journey of creating this beast, I took it to workshops. I remember this one guy, he had a workshop in Ripley Career or something. And he was just horrible. But it wasn't because he was horrible because he didn't know what the hell he was doing. But he was negative, like negative. And I think all directors have to have a level of kindness in the rehearsal process, which you have, because that's what the artist needs. They need to feel a kindness and a level of optimism and encouraging, not like, no, that's a dumb idea. I mean, he literally would say, to other people, and I'm fairly confident, but he would say, to other people, he would say, that's a dumb idea. I wouldn't, I don't think it's going to work that way. I'm like, I wanted to go, who the fuck are you to be telling this girl it's a dumb idea, and so that would be my advice, because I think that's one of the things you have is kindness.
It's true, because you're going to be kind because they're taking a risk in front of you. We're all going to be disciplined, and there's a time to say, like, hey, you got to shape up, or we got to do this, or whatever. But if you're not kind, you're not encouraging people to take risk and to do something surprising or wonderful.
It's huge. Is there a solo show or an artist that has inspired you the most? You can even say a director.
Well, it's funny. It's Peter Brook, and I've only seen a little bit of his work, but I read his The Empty Space, and that sounds so simple because I think he's inspired every director who after the 1960s. But I just like the essence of the immediate theater.
Immediate theater.
That thing that he talks about in the book is the immediate.
It's a book I need to read.
And I will get you a copy because I have a couple.
Okay.
It is. It's because of that immediate gets to be to why are we doing it? Why do I have to do this play today for this audience?
Right.
And when I understand that, that's the immediacy because
kind of serves a story.
Because I don't want to I'm not. I started as an actor, but I was never a performer. I didn't need to be seen. I needed to tell a story.
Right.
And so that's the major one.
Is there a book that you think all actors should read?
I think The Empty Space. That's nailed that good.
Yeah. Is there a favorite documentary film?
First one that comes to my mind is Hoop Dreams, so I'm going to say that one because you're asking me.
I don't think I've seen that.
Hoop Dreams you'd love. They follow the two basketball prodigies in Chicago, high school kids who are trying to get into a college. And it's just great because it tells, there's other documentaries I'm sure that are brilliant, but that one sticks with me, mainly because it's sports, because there's, the challenge to succeed is so hard.
Oh, yeah, especially in basketball.
How hard they have to work, where they are. Anything can happen. Injury can happen.
Death, drugs.
Death can happen. Early parenting can happen.
Yeah.
And just because you get to a Division I school or not doesn't dictate whether you're successful.
No, there was a guy who I trained with. He told me there's only about 300 suited up professional basketball players in the NBA. When you think of the perspective of how many people play basketball and how only 300
are going to play pro.
Yeah. There's only 300 suited up.
Then you go to Division 1, then
Yeah.
Division 3.
And then you could even say there's only 150 starters. So to be a starter on an NBA team is huge. It's huge. I mean, people make fun of people like, oh, he sucks. He doesn't suck.
He doesn't suck.
He doesn't suck.
That's the thing. When you hear that, whenever I hear that in the stands, and I have a friend of mine who's also a big baseball fan, whenever we hear
Same thing with baseball.
somebody chants, you suck, it's like, not really.
Not really. He's playing pro ball at a very high level. Advice that you would give to yourself 10 years ago and 10 years from now?
Wow, I didn't think about 10 years from now. So I'm going to go 10 years ago first. 10 years ago first, it's something that I have a hard time with. I would tell everybody when you're working.
What do you mean?
Because market and promote. And
let people know that you are working.
Let people know. And I know this is a fact that, like, nobody will come. That's okay. They pay attention and they know you're working. And when you do meet them 10 years from the moment right now, and they'll be aware that, like, oh, you were doing all this stuff, even though they never came. And you're not a pain in the ass. You know if you're a pain in the ass. You know if you're aggressive and you're over insensitive and you're self-grandizing and you bring it up every
People
time
want
you're
to
having
know
lunch.
that you're
But they want to
working.
know you're working.
Yeah. That's good advice, Patrick.
I'm hesitant on it. I don't even know it's like I'm making a point. But I was watching myself with the solo show that I wrote and I was in, and how much the
recent
topic mattered. So I was tweeting and I was emailing artistic directors to say, this is important to me. I'd like you to come.
I only came because you sent the email out.
And I said, yeah, and I sent it to you. I sent it very funny way. You said
I would have never known. And I saw the email, so I kept the email, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to go make sure I see this show.
And that was, and it was telling people, and you can tell them when it's important, and you can tell them when you want them to know, but tell people, because I'm not great at that. I'm trying to get better, but 10 years ago, I wish I was doing it because there was a lot of, and I wish I was more aggressive.
Well, I think all actors have that problem, and you just have to be fearless at it.
Because you can get all the work in the world,
right.
And you can be great at it, but if that's not reaching a circle beyond the people.
Yeah, it's good advice because I have casting directors on my newsletter list, and they don't check out. They're interested.
They don't check out. They want to know. They can't come to anything.
No.
They can't. I mean, it's funny. I make the joke, like, if I directed a play for an artistic director and I did it in their living room, they'd go out to eat that night. Like, I know they can't see everything. But that doesn't mean they're not paying attention. And what I've learned, but what I see from other people is when they're supposed to be there, when the person's supposed to be there, when the attention is supposed to be drawn from a community, it happens.
Right.
But the accumulation of knowledge is important. And the thing that's funny, what do I want to tell myself from
To do that?
10 years now is like, 10 years from now is like, well, keep doing that. But the other thing is, hopefully what I'm learning now in this moment is to make a living better, you're worth the money. That's today's lesson.
Yeah.
So that 10 years from now, I can say, all right, are you, it's still something I do now, but are you creating the opportunity for the next people?
Right.
Because...
And that's a big process. That's a big deal for you as community of theater.
Yeah, and I think it's something that there needs to, I love this conversation. There's something that needs to happen, which is the legacy of helping. It really is a craft that is learned from one generation to the next generation to the next, and to make sure that you're helping people not only create opportunities, but opportunities to grow.
Sending the elevator down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last one I have is, if you could put a message on the billboard for actors and directors to see, what would it say?
Just for the artist to see as a reminder?
It could be anything. It could be, don't do it. Or it could be, do it. I don't know.
It's very fun, just do it, the Nike thing.
Yeah.
My very first thought on that was...
It could be profound or it could be not.
My thing is to go, I don't know, right? It's the big thing that's up there. And it says, I don't know isn't the thing that stops you. That's the thing that starts the investigation.
Right.
Like, I don't know isn't the end. That's the beginning of the work. And it's exciting.
That's great, man. That's great. I have to ask this question. I was fortunate because I knew people, and I always marketed, which goes into, because that's how I knew Daniela, because I'm always staying connected with people. How does an actor find a director like you?
Well, here's what I would say is that I believe it's about community. And, I have a theater company called The Farm Theater, farmtheater.org. Check it out. But then we do these things called bullpen sessions, which are pulling people in a room, talking on a topic. The reason those are important, besides learning about the topic, is learning about community. Because put yourself around the people who you think are good, who share your values, And from the people who share your values, you want to keep working with them, but they're going to know other people who share your values who have different skills.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have a disease of forgetfulness, but that thing of don't forget to ask, don't be afraid to ask. Nobody does this without help.
No.
And everybody needs help.
No.
So ask.
Craig Lucas said that. Actually, Craig Lucas is he's the one who got me on the journey to find you, because he referred me to some girl named Jill. She's kind of a big regional director, and she was interested, but then our schedules never worked out. And then so she goes, I know somebody who works with the Lab Rat company, and there's a girl there named Danielle. I'm like, I know Daniela. And so she goes, you should reach out to them. And I reached out to them, and I talked to her, and then bounced to you, man.
That's awesome.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for this meeting. Thanks for this, man.
This was great. Thank you.